Hello, welcome everyone. I am so excited that you're tuning into Align with the Cosmos. We get to hear from Gwenyth Luptak. She is going to give us her evolutionary report from the astrological perspective to see how we can make the best use of these cosmic dynamics that we're all experiencing right now. You might have heard her share about what was happening at the first half of fall and autumn, at least in the northern hemisphere, spring if you're coming in from the southern hemisphere. And now we get to hear what's taking us into the end of 2024. What's going to close the door in 2024? Looking forward to hearing all about this, Gwenyth. Welcome back. Thank you so much for joining us again.
Oh, thank you, Jennifer. It's always a pleasure to be here. And what I'm gonna focus on today is two Mercury and Mars retrogrades that are starting at the end of the year at November 25th for Mercury, and Mars will start on December 6th. So those are two important, and they'll kind of be working in tandem a lot of the time. Two important phases that we'll be heading for the end of the year. Late fall and end of the year. And so many people are usually 20 to 21 days, sometimes 22 days each time. But Mars happens every 2 years, and it's a retrograde for 80 days. So it has a larger, longer impact. And it has its own character that's also being redirected at that time. So with retrogrades, it's all about review, reorganization, and repairing. So, but it's also important to note that there's a front end shadow and there's a back end shadow whenever we talk about retrograde planets. Now, the front end shadow is the first phase of when the first passage of the planet that goes over the degrees of the zodiac that are going to be affected by the retrograde. And it lays down the groundwork for what is probably going to be dealt with during the retrograde phase. And it is typically experienced in a subconscious kind of way, meaning that we might get inklings, but we don't really know what's going to come over for review until the retrograde phase. And the retrograde phase is typically when we become consciously the issues are that need to be reviewed and reworked. And then finally, the back end shadow is when the final passage, when the planet goes direct and the final passage over the degrees that it's been retrograding on. And this is all about integrating what has been learned. So there's 3 passages over the degrees of a sign that are about the retrograde. So it's just an important thing to take note of, because the front end and the back end are often not very visible, or we're not necessarily aware, but they do have impact in terms of wanting to do the best that you can with the retrograde experience. So that just gives you a bit of an idea, Jen, of how things are laid out in terms of a retrograde experience.
Absolutely. Thank
Okay,
you for
so next,
clarifying that further
yeah.
too, because there was a little bit of a glitch in the beginning there when you were talking about the Mercury and Mars retrogrades, where it just froze for a moment. And I guess it sounded like you were saying that with the Mercury retrograde, it happens a little more often than the Mars retrograde, and then
Yeah.
it lasts for a period as well. Yeah, so that might have been just the part that we missed there for a second when it froze. But I love that, everybody here, I'm sure, has heard about the Mercury retrograde, right? But all the planets go through a retrograde and they all have impact. So I love that. Yes, we'll be talking about the Mercury retrograde and also what it means when Mars goes retrograde. So I'm really looking forward to hearing about this. And I love that you talked about the passages as well, because that's when I talk about transformation, I talk about the 3 main phases where we go through the awareness and then a rite of passage and a rebirth. So with the retrogrades, taking 3 passages, it's a real opportunity to kind of reset and rebirth a new way, like kind of up level whatever it is that we're moving through, whatever issues come up and arise for us during those retrograde times. So yeah, let's get to it.
Okay, that's wonderful, Jen. So just to run over the retrograde Mercury times are usually 3 to 4 times a year is typically what it is. Usually 20 to 21 days at a time, sometimes 22. And whereas with the Mars, it's every second year and it's 80 days at a time. Okay, so to go to the focus more now on the Mercury retrograde, rewinding and reflecting, navigating Mercury retrograde in the sign of Sagittarius. And that runs from November 25th to December 15th. And it's the full passage is in the sign of Sagittarius. It's 22 degrees and all the way sweeps back to 6.5 degrees. And then we'll cover those, 3 passages over those degrees. So anybody that has planets in those degrees is going to have more impact, is going to be quite specific to those planets and those aspects that the Mercury retrograde runs across. And if you know the house that Sagittarius is in your chart, then that's going to be also a key area where you're going to be personally focusing on the retrograde. So the front end shadow started on November 7th, so it's already been running for 7, and then the back end goes all the way to January 2nd. Now, key themes for this retrograde chart are, first of all, we have a lovely and rare Star of David, which brings a supportive, protective kind of energy protective energy around the chart, in that it is just a whole structure of enclosed positive aspects throughout the chart. And what it does is kind of cushions things, probably, I would say, maybe softening the impact somewhat in terms of the kind of issues that, the degree of the issues that are liable to come up for individuals. We also have a Mercury opposing Jupiter in this chart, and they're actually called mutually receptive in that they are in each other's signs. And so both the sun and the planets are all focused on the information dissemination of all kinds, whether it's learning or it's education or it's just communicating with your neighbor, or including all the way up to including your own belief systems, which are the very structure of what you act on. So all of those areas are the target areas, the broad target areas of this retrograde. So there is the potential for getting stuck on certain ideas during this time, and that is because Saturn is negatively aspected to those planets, and it also has very few easy flow transits throughout the whole passage of the retrograde time. So it just makes it that much harder for things to crystallize and be, it just calls for more time. It's a persevering need for persevering, and just one step at a time is very much a Saturnian kind of approach to things. So stuck on ideas is that you might have difficulty moving forward on ideas that maybe need some readapting. So just to keep that in mind. Now, the Saturn has been in the sign of Pisces for the last year, and it will continue for at least another year and a half. And Pisces deals with spiritual matters, and Saturn is very much about integrity and structuring and making things permanent. So while Saturn's moving through the sign of Pisces, it really brings up matters of spiritual development and personal integrity. There's a broad theme over this period of time that is also just another thing to keep in mind. There's one more aspect, is Jupiter squaring Saturn. Now, this has been, since this late summer, it came into orbit, and it will continue into through the winter. So it's a longer term transit. It's not the easiest one. It's kind of challenges long-standing structures and beliefs, because that's Saturn putting up a wait a minute here, you got to tell me how things are really going here. We need to review this. So there's challenges in terms of your own personal beliefs and structures, may be something that has been is a theme for you. It creates uncertainty about future plans. but it does support taking more responsibility for your actions wherever that may, if that's being called for in your life. It would be just something to take note on a personal level. Patience is needed for growth over time. It's definitely a one step at a time kind of transit, but there's benefits that come with that because Jupiter is all about abundance and expansion. Saturn is just putting some guardrails on that. So that's why it's kind of moving the way it will be moving. So it's a time to focus on revitalizing existing plans that you have in your life rather than starting anything new. It's always a word of thumb not to start any really new plans during a retrograde because you don't really have all the information in. So there might be sacrifices in some areas in your life in order to grow in others. So you may have to make some choices. That too is a kind of Saturn, Jupiter kind of trying to work things out kind of move. And so perseverance, again, just emphasizing perseverance is an important piece. Jen, there is so much happening these days and so fast for humanity. It's actually a blessing to have these slowdowns for
Mm.
integration, for you and integration. And yeah,
That's
so
exactly what I was
that's
thinking too. Was
yeah,
about,
yeah.
it really makes sense, to have this time of like kind of wrapping up, completing, integrating what 2024 has been. And that's typically what we do towards the end of the year is kind of just, reflect on the year that's been and how we are expecting to move into what we're going to bring into and release as we move into 2025. So it sounds like the cosmos is really supporting that kind of passage from one year into the
Yeah,
next.
that's
Yeah,
yeah, I like the way you put that. It is the year end is just a natural time for reviewing, and these retrogrades kind of fit right in, don't they?
they do. They do. And you're
Yeah,
talking about
yeah,
spiritual development and personal integrity is really what we kind of share, on this channel is all
yeah,
about
yeah.
that spiritual development and personal integrity. So I love that this really emphasizes that. Yeah.
That's great. That's wonderful. Yes. Okay. Well, let's move on to Mars retrograde. Turning inward, embracing the lessons of Mars retrograde. So this retrograde, remember, it only happens once every 2 years, and it starts on December 6th, and it runs all the way to the 23rd of February. It begins in the Leo at 6 degrees, but it does swing all the way back to 17 degrees Cancer. So it will be in two signs. So there'll be two different vibrational kind of tones being hit there at different times. And again, once again, anybody that has knows where their planets are, if it is in that range of degrees, then they're going to be more impacted by the Mars energy for sure. And then knowing what house these degrees are in is also very helpful for people. So the front end started all the way in October 5th. So we've been in the front end of the Mars retrograde for quite some time already. And then the back end runs all the way to May 1st, 2025. So it gives you some idea of just what a broad sweep really that a Mars retrograde is. So it's definitely a slow down time and more thoughtful action. Mars, it rules the principle of action. It's the force that initiates activity, and it simply is the force that gets things done. So if you need to do something in life, you have to call on your Mars energy. Okay, so Mars retrograde is it's time for introspection on your past actions. It's action oriented, whereas Mercury is more on the communication level and information of all kinds. Mars is going to be about action and doing and the things that you have initiated in terms of movement in your life. So it's a great time for planning projects and addressing unresolved issues. That's the time to do it. So save those things for the December and into later into the next year. But do be aware that Mars does not like being thwarted. Mars is all about forward energy. So during a retrograde, it's actually kind of the reins are pulled back on it. So what can happen for people is if you have any unexpressed emotions or feelings and that, you might find that sometimes you can get suddenly angry or irritable, just kind of popping up there. And that's because, when you do try and step out and make movements and maybe what your plans are, it is premature and it won't come together the way you want it to. And that can stir a lot of unpleasant emotions. I mean, just to be aware that you can have triggers at times. And so can other people around you. There's increased risk of accidents during a Mars retrograde, again, because the force of Mars energy is not really clearly moving forward. So, when you do have an accident, it's because you're just kind of disconnected in the moment for whatever reason. So there is an increased risk for accidents and also for misunderstandings. So, flag that. And it's also important to recharge and reflect rather than beginning, like I say, those new beginnings, because if you start anything of any consequence during this time, it simply is premature. It might seem like it's going to work during the retrograde, but you will find out as time moves on, once the planet is direct and you move on in life, that things were premature and you have to redo things or they just don't work out, et cetera, et cetera. So the best thing to do during Mars retrograde is to review your plans and just fix any pieces that don't move the way you want them to move. And just, you can kick back a little bit about a lot of expectation in the external world in the next couple of months. Mars retrograde chart also has a Ceres conjunct Venus at 29 degrees Capricorn. That stands out for me. Capricorn as the sign that rules your sense of life purpose. You're standing in the community, and it's also the sign that governs karma. Ceres is the dwarf planet that is considered the cosmic mother. So she's the nurturing principle and for humanity. Venus rules love and relationships. And so you've got those two conjunct, they're in the same degree and they're at the final degree of Capricorn. When a planet's at the final degree, there's 30 degrees in a sign. When planet's at 29, then that's really a focus time. In this particular combination, the focus is on the state of support. What is the state of support and nourishment within your relationships would be one key thing that would come out of the Ceres conjunct Venus combination there. 29 is a moment of fate. The lessons of recent past are are they going to be successfully completed? You will find this out in a 29 degrees. So either successfully completed or there will be a need to relearn. So that there's kind of a mini karmic circumstance with not a retrograde planet, but when planets hit 29 degrees. So just to note that. Another aspect in this chart is Lilith opposing Chiron. Now, Lilith is a truth seeker. She's an animate truth seeker, and Chiron is considered the wounded healer. They're both pretty intense planetary positions here, and this combination will encourage the use of discernment and insight. It's kind of a flag for you, the need to and the ability there for more discernment and drawing on your insight on the perceptions that you've developed in the recent months, 2024, if you like, and time to seek balance in your attitudes and your interactions, because it's an opposition. So balance is always an important piece with oppositions. Those two planets actually aren't in harmony to start with, but with the use of discernment and insight and drawing on what you feel that you've learned in recent months and combining that with, balanced attitude and approach to people, which, the 29 Capricorn is kind of suggesting that too, then it will actually work very well for you. It's just another tool for this lengthy period of time. Another aspect that's important is the Mars opposed Pluto. This is a very potent aspect. It started just a few weeks back, or a couple of months back, really, and it runs all the way into January. So it's another one of those longer term aspects. It emphasizes the need for clarity and direction at this point in time. So it's Mars and Pluto co-rule the sign of Scorpio. Scorpio rules the mysteries in life, including the mysteries of your own soul. And Pluto represents the soul's intentions, whereas Mars acts on these intentions in the world. So you can see where you want those two to be harmonizing. When they are aligned, you can really target your goals and be quite successful about things. So this combination, this opposition with Pluto and Mars, invites deep exploration of your soul's intentions and asks for transformations where needed. So that's another big piece of review here is once again looking at your soul intentions and feeling them out if it's really in alignment, what you may have learned in recent months that seems applicable, and whatever is not quite jiving or needs updating perhaps is where you should be making those transformations during the Mars retrograde. So when Mars opposing Pluto is aligned, it's a wonderful time for reaping benefits. You have positive, high-powered changes and successful, rewarding outcomes. So, in other words, even though it's a retrograde energy, if you have been working well with your Mars-Pluto combination there, have both of them working clearly with each other, then it is a time when the rewards can become very apparent to you. If they're not aligned, there will be red flags like resistance from others, perhaps, even resistance from yourself from wanting to make changes or whatever. But the act of resistance is a clear sign that they're not aligned. Power struggles that might show up in relationships is a clear red flag. Controlling behaviors of any kind, that you wanting to control something or somebody wanting to control you anyway, that's Pluto, negative Pluto for sure. Pluto can at the darker end of Pluto can be quite controlling and not want any change. Yet it rules the soul, and the soul is constantly needing to move forward for growth and expansion. So, so finally, if you just get frustrated and abandon your plans altogether, that could also be a flag that you don't have your Mars and Pluto energy running well together, meaning what it is that you come here with your soul intentions to do is not linked up smoothly with the Mars action principle in your life. So there's some kind of glitches somewhere that you need looking at. So I have a couple of questions to consider here. How well are you taking care of yourself and those you care about? Could you make some changes? And if so, where? So that's again talking about the 29 degrees of a planet coupled with the opposition. So there is definitely a link with relationships in some context, and nurturing relationships, nurturing self and nurturing relationships. So in summary, it's a time to embrace this time of inner reflection, to foster patience, to make adjustments wherever there might be some needed, to seek clarity with an open mind, and have a willingness to adapt with discernment and fortitude. And so that's the Mars retrograde offering that is there for us coming in the next few months, Jen.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Sounds like patience is key.
Yeah,
Yeah.
patience is key. Yeah.
And a lot of time for reflection and integration. And I really appreciate those questions that you offer as a place of focus, for that integration, for that reflection. How are we taking care of ourselves? How are we taking care of others? And noticing where we can direct some of our time and energy to best support us on the soul growth path forward.
Absolutely. And um, I think a lot of us sometimes kind of go kicking and screaming into the retrogrades because it does slow us down, especially Mars
Mm,
retrograde. It does slow us down, but it's there for a really solid reason.
yeah.
Because we can't really move as fast as we think we can move in the long run. So there's a lot of that's why the stars out there keep the sweep, the planets keep the sweep, the retrograde sweep going through the signs, with that movement, because it is it's needed.
Yeah, and I,
Simply
I
put.
see slowing down now as time to realign. I am one of those people that used to kick and scream when anything tried to slow me down. I actually would cringe when I heard the word relax. So it's been a big journey
Ah,
for me to learn, how to slow down
yeah.
and to really tune in to make sure that body, mind, spirit, and soul are all in harmony. And as we can align with the cosmos, then we can really be in the flow where there is that ease and empowerment rather than that stress and feeling like we're not in control of anything, you know?
Uh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're here, anyone is here to work with the master plan, if you like, that what
Yeah.
has been designated on the other side before we came here. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. And I love that you talk about Sirius as the cosmic mother and Lilith as the truth seeker. They're not planetary bodies that we often hear from astrologers, but is so important to our evolutionary path. So I'm really happy that you focus
Yes.
on that and give us some awareness around those planetary bodies and influences as well. So I really appreciate everything you shared, Glenna. Thank you so much for all of it.
Yeah, more than welcome. It's a pleasure, and I certainly hope that this can bring some insight and some support for people in the coming weeks. That's my
Absolutely. And
goal.
yeah, I mean, I encourage people too to put in their comments like, what house is your Mercury in? Does Pluto and
Ah,
Mars
yes.
harmonize and align at any point in your chart? Do you need a link to access your chart? Any of those questions, comments, you can put them in there. We'll respond to them and continue to support you on your
Absolutely.
journey. Yeah. Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right. All right,
Okay.
everyone. There you have it. What's taking us into the end of 2024. So we close the door and open up to the new year and new you. Thank you so much for joining us today. Bye for now.